just for you and me. The dogwood was never to grow strong and tall.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode number 14. I believe I left off at episode 14. If I'm not mistaken, I left off. I was sweeping floors and driving a truck for Bennett Tool Die off of Clifton Avenue out in West Nashville. My father-in-law had got me a job at Bennett Tool Die. So I am sweeping floors, driving a truck, and he's beginning to let me use drill presses and stuff like that I couldn't mess up too much. Because when you mess up in a machine shop or a tool and die shop, you put one hole in the wrong place and you very easily cost somebody $500 just putting a hole in the wrong place. Or anything you do in a machine shop, tool and die shop, it has to be precision. And of course, sweeping floors don't have to be too precision, or driving a truck, just hold it between the lines. So that's what I was doing. So on my truck driving experience, I went out one time and I went to the steel company, and I bought this 4-inch diameter piece of solid cold rolled steel, 8 foot long. And of course, some of you know, some of you don't. When you buy the steel, it's greasy. It's got oil on it from where they've made it, so as it won't rust when they're shipping it. It's getting to you and everything. So here I am on the back of this big old long truck. It's a 4-inch diameter piece of cold rolled steel, 8 foot long. Well, don't know what in the world I wanted to drive uptown. Don't ask me. I have no clue why I wanted to drive through downtown Nashville. Because I picked this piece of metal up over somewhere near the fairgrounds. There was a steel company over there, and I had picked it up and going back to West Nashville, but I wanted to drive through town. I'm still just a redneck as they come, I guess you might say, and wet behind the ears thing. So I'm going to go through town. I want to see the Ryman Auditorium, from the Ryman Auditorium, because I love country music, and I knew it was on 5th Avenue. So I'm coming up 5th Avenue, and 4th Avenue goes out of town, 5th Avenue comes into town. So when I cross Broadway, on your right, on 5th Avenue, is the Ryman Auditorium. Well, right above the Ryman Auditorium, there's a red light. Okay? So I drive slow, and I go up, and the red light catches me, and I stop at the red light, and I'm in this big truck, and I'm by myself, and I got a piece of steel on the back of my truck that weigh about 500 pounds. If it weighed an ounce, it'd weigh 500 pounds. 4 inches in diameter, 8 foot long, cold rolled steel. A lot of you don't know what a cold rolled steel is. A lot of you don't know what hot rolled steel is. I do. Cold rolled steel is very slick, and it's got oil on it. Remember, it's got oil on it. Well, and this truck is like a 4-speed transmission. Well, when I let out on the clutch, off the back went the big piece of steel. Off the back, right in the middle of the street, went this big piece of steel. It just slid off that truck just like it was on ice. Here I am by myself in the middle of 5th Avenue, just above the Ryman Auditorium. And there is no way in this world I have a clue how I'm going to get that back on the truck. Well, it just so happened there was 4 guys walking down the street just before lunch, and they was on their way to lunch. 4 guys saw this happen, and they were all great big guys. And they came over there. See, God's right here. See, God is right here. He's right there. Oh boy, is he in there? And did he come to my rescue? Those 4 guys, along with myself, picked that big hunk of steel back up, and we put it back on there, and they helped me tie it down tight enough this time that it wasn't going anywhere. But it didn't have to worry whether it was going anywhere or not, because I wasn't going to take off fast no more anyway. and I was going to crawl to get out of town to get where I belong. But God sent 4 people right when I needed them. And don't tell me it wasn't God that did it. It had to have been God to send 4 people to put that back up on the truck. And to this day, unless they see this video of me telling this, that company or no one ever knew that. No one ever knew that until now. And the man that owned the company, he's passed away. He's got a couple kids around. He could probably see this someday, who knows. But no one ever knew that piece of steel come off that truck. And 4 guys helped me get it back up on there. And only through the grace of God was I able to get that back on and trap it down. So needless to say, I went on back to work. And that's part of my experience of driving that big truck, of being careful what you got on there, paying attention to what you're doing, and don't be in town when you're supposed to be somewhere else. See, I'd been fired had they known I was sitting on church on Fifth Avenue by the Grand Ole Opry. If they'd have known I was there for any reason whatsoever without being told to been there, they would have fired me. Because back then, they didn't put up with nothing. Back in those days, you didn't have mustache, you didn't have sideburns, you didn't have beard, you didn't have long hair. So that's how it was back in the early 60s. And it was that way all the way through the 60s, the best I remember. But at any rate, I wanted to tell you about me and my experience of driving that big truck and what God did for me while I was driving that truck. And he certainly did help me that day. And there's no doubt in my mind about that. And there was something I was going to back up and tell you, and I forgot what the dickens it was, but it's something I really need to tell you. It'll come to me somewhere down the line, but there's something I need to back up and tell you that happened to me. I guess I'm going to have to start writing some of this stuff down as I think of it, and then I can come back and tell you about it. But anyway, I went on and stayed with Bennett Tool Die, and I helped him make them make what they call a draw mold, which drawed the end of a hot water tank for a state stove over in Ashland City. They're not called state stove anymore, but at the time they were called state stove, and they were in Ashland City, and they built nothing but hot water tanks. And I helped build the die that it was called a draw die. You had one that was rounded like this, and you had one just like it, come down inside of it, push it down in there, and when it come out, it was rounded just like and it went right on the end of a big tube, and it had 2 of them, one on each end, and they welded them with an automatic welder around there, and that became a hot water tank. So I helped the owner of the company. We'd stay up to 12, 1 o'clock in the morning trying these dies out to getting the part right, so we could get the part over to Ashland City, so they had welders over there that was welding them up as fast as they could make them. They hired us we had a welder as well over in another location that I had to go over there and weld the tanks, the caps on the ends of those tanks. Over there, they were so far behind, they couldn't put them out fast enough. And of course, back in those days, the union was just getting into town and everything, and so I don't know much. I know we never was in a union. Our company never was in a union, but I know that things sort of got slowed down from time to time because of that or whatever. So I helped make those things, and I helped make the dies that stamped out, the top for stoves, the sides for refrigerators. I learned how to do that. I stayed with Bennett Tool Die. I believe it was three years. I believe I stayed with Bennett Tool. It might have been nearly 4, but I stayed with Bennett Tool Die. I know for sure for 3 years, and I learned how to build all these dies and all these molds, and I learned how to do all that stuff. I remember the first hole I ever drilled at what was called a stripper spring hole. Well, most nobody knows what a stripper spring is. Have no clue. Well, a stripper spring are all different sizes and all different lengths. Top of the dies are got thick steel, some 3 inches thick, some 2. Anyway, all different thickness. So, and have got these 2 to 4 pins that they put in the press. It goes up and down on these pins, and the metal runs through there. And when it goes down, it presses out the part. And then when it raises up, those trigger bolts pushes the part off. And the part falls down, you pull the part off. So that caused trigger bolt holes. And I was drilling trigger bolt holes, and all the springs was the same length. And you had to have all those holes, and these holes particularly I remember was 1.5 inches diameter, and it had to be 1.5 inches deep. That's what they had to be. And all of them had to be the same. Well, of course, quite naturally, the first ones I did, I probably did 10 or 15 of them, and I was using what they call a portomatic. And it had a magnet on the bottom of it. You pull this handle and it would stick to the steel, and then you had a drill out front and a handle, and that magnet would hold it down. You'd drill these holes in that big piece of steel. So anyway, I was just drilling away, but I got one of them 1/4 inch too deep. Too deep. Of course, I got a lecture pretty quick off of that. I got to pay more attention, and I totally understand that. But what they did, they ended up having to put a washer under it in order to raise that spring up to where it had tension to get it. When you put your big plate on it, the stripper itself was how big the die was a plate, and it had all these holes in it that went around all these punches and all these things that cut holes in the steel, and it would go down, and those springs would push it back up, and that's what stripped your part off of the die. So anyway, that was the first mistake I made. Now, I made lots of mistakes, but I really took it serious, and I didn't make too many mistakes. I actually became a very good tool and die maker, and the machinist and so forth. But that's what I did with Bennett Tool and Die. Well, Mr. Ferris, my father-in-law, he decided to open up his own company. So he opened up a company on Webster Street, downtown Madison over here. It was a 2-car garage. That's what it was, a 2-car garage. He rented a 2-car garage, and he already worked for a tool and die company, so he had connections. And Avco was beginning to get big. Avco was beginning to really do a lot of work. DuPont, he was in with DuPont, so he opened up this thing. And so before I went to work for him, Avco got to working, and I could get a job at Avco almost making 1/3 more money because it was union. Back to the union, because it was I could make approximately 1/3 more money working for Avco, which built wings, and they also built Bell helicopters at the time. A Bell helicopter. Some of you may or may not remember a Bell helicopter, but and also at one time, whether you know it or not, Avco also built stoves and refrigerators out there at one time. So when the airplane deal came through and the helicopter thing was winding down, they got got a contract for a C-5A wing. I don't know how big the airplane was, but the wing must have been 50 foot long. I mean, it was a huge wing. So I got a job. My father-in-law then got me a job out there, and they put me on nights. Because first thing, if you're new at a place like that, what they gonna do? They want to put you on nights, and because there aren't openings, everybody wants to work daytime, so there aren't openings in the daytime, so they put me on nights. So I worked a second shift at nights out there, and by being in a union, you were classed A, B, and C class, and a C class guy couldn't do what the A class or B class man supposed to be doing. Well, here I am. I got my learning from what they call a job shop, which was Bennett Tool Die, and believe this or not, I was so far ahead of what they were doing out there in that union, wouldn't nobody believe it. I was doing, after 3 years, I was doing what guys had been out there for 20 years was trying to do. They didn't know half of them didn't know what they were doing. and they were in the union that's coming and going as they pleased, done what they wanted to do when they wanted to. Well, here I am back. I just come out of the country 3 years, 4 years later, whatever it was, and went on a carnival to see a bunch of crooks and liars and thieves. Well, I come back and if I put all that behind me, and now I've got in the tool and die business, and I've learned so much in 3 years. I've been in that tool and die shop. I've learned so much. Now you pour me into a union, which I haven't a clue what a union's all about. You put me out there with all these people that's been there 15, 20 years in a union, and you hand me a blueprint that says you got 75 hours to make this piece that's no bigger than this Bible, and I can make it in 6 hours. Well, needless to say, it didn't take me about 3 or 4 days till I was already in trouble, because that wasn't how I was taught. I was taught, here's the job, do it as quick as you can, just as long as it's right. Well, I'm walking into a union out here, said you can't do that in 4 hours. You got to take 75 hours to do that. That's job security. They don't care what it costs to make an airplane. A union don't care what it costs to make an airplane. They could care less. It ain't their nuts, bolts, and screws. It's not their aluminum. So here I am, sitting here twiddling my thumbs when I could make this in 6 hours. And I'm sitting here twiddling my thumbs, waiting on them to give me something else to do, and they're not going to give me nothing else to do. So I'm supposed to be half done with this job. It was an absolute nightmare of how I went from learning so much to not having to do nothing and making almost twice as much money for doing nothing. Well, I just still didn't understand all I knew about all this deal. So my father-in-law finally gets off the side and tell me what's it all about, but I'm still impatient. I am still impatient. I'm out here doing nothing, twiddling my thumbs, and I ought to be making those parts, those wings. And the parts, let me explain to you what the parts, they would hand you a blueprint as big as this stage up here, and you'd have to pick out a part half the size of this Bible in it, and then go get the material, and then you would do whatever me as a C-class person was supposed to do to it to make it form a part that would rivet into the wing of the airplane. They were parts that were going in those airplanes. I didn't make the wings. Nobody made the total wing. All these people had a different thing to do. So anyway, make a long story short, one day I got impatient, so I went around up there in the machine where the machine was sitting. I went up there and I proceeded to go on and make the part without saying anything to anybody. So I'm up there and got this thing all clapped. I've done it already for 3 years, 2 years. I've done more than I've seen them do. In 3 months I'm out there. So I go up here and do what I know how to do. But I'm a C class, remember? A and B is above me. So I'm up there and I got this thing clamped down on this machine. I hit this button, that ship starts flying, that thing starts looking good. I look around the corner and here comes about 25 guys up through here. Well, of course, one of them is the stewardess. He's not like an airplane stewardess. He's a stewardess over all these people that work in the Department 333. He's over all them, and he's got a grievance against me because I'm a C class and I'm not supposed to be doing a B class job. So the boss has to come in there with him and talk to me. He says, Lonnie, says, you're C class, says you can't do this. This is a B class job. And that's so I've always been pretty hot-tempered when it's at certain times. Most time I keep my cool, but sometimes I don't. And so I said, well, but I'm C class, and I said, this says I'm supposed to have 60 or 70 hours to do this job, and it's been laying back there on my desk because I can't get nobody to do anything to it before I can finish the rest of it up. I said, well, can we not get a B-class guy to do this? And of course, the guy, the foreman that works for the company, he said, Lonnie said, you're a C-class and you just can't do stuff like that. And that's not how it works around here. You just got to wait till they get their time to come and do all that stuff. So to make a long story, that didn't sit well with me at all. At that point right there, and I had only been there, I'd been there, I guess at the time, I'd been there 6 or 7 months or something like that, I guess. And I just throwed up my hands and that's no way to build an airplane. That's no way to do any kind of work when all you've been able to do since you left the farm, you've been doing what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it as fast as you can do it and do it right. And when I walked into that union, it stopped immediately. All the things went out the window. In my past, went out the window. It was gone bye-bye. As long as I was going to be there, I was going to do it the union way or no way. So the guy that was the foreman, he wasn't in the union, but the guy that was the foreman that worked for the company, he come down there and told me, he said, Lonnie, he said, you're not even supposed to leave your department. But he come down and told me, he said, Lonnie, go anywhere in this plant you want to go, anytime you want to go, just don't upset them no more. Just leave them people alone. He said, you just can't do these things. So come in here, clock in, and come back and do what you got to do when you've got to do it. Otherwise, you can go anywhere, anytime. Just stay away. Don't do nothing they say do unless it's a job that you're supposed to be doing. Because he said they're not going to do nothing. He said nothing we can do about it. This is a union. As long as they do the job and they don't set the hours, some crook is setting the hours that's in the union. Sets hours. If it takes 65 hours to make this Bible right here, and you can make it in 6 hours, somebody is a crook somewhere. So that's what I was up against at Avco. At the time, it was Avco. So one day, somebody said something to me because I started staying gone. I was never in my department. And nobody could make me stay in my department because I done been told by the people that work for the company, said, just stay away from them, just don't cause no more trouble, just whatever. So they got mad at me then. All the guys got mad at me then because they called me brown noser. If it wasn't one thing in that union, out there it was another. The people were lazy. They were playing pranks on each other all the time. On the bathroom floor, the newspapers was half-inch thick. Everybody go in there every morning, sit on a commode or wherever they're done, and read newspapers. Read the newspaper and then throw it on the floor. That's where it be left. So anyway, one day at lunch, they made me mad enough. I just got up in the middle of the table and told them, in so many words, what I can't say today, what they could do, where they could go, and if any of them didn't like it, what are they going to do about it? So at that point, I proceeded to go to the main man. I said, I want to transfer out of here. He said, well, where do you want to go? You tell me where you want to go. That's how it was with me. I done my job, and they knew I was doing my job, and I could do anything out there I wanted to do out there. I could have retired out there. I wasn't going to put up with that stuff. I said, well, send me to the wood shop. The wood shop was, I got over in the wood shop, and they had a lot of different departments, all kinds of different departments over there. So I ended up over in the wood shop. When I got to the wood shop, nothing had changed. Wasn't no different in the wood shop than was nowhere else. So I proceeded at that point that I wasn't going to be there much longer. So by that time, my father-in-law was doing pretty good in his machine shop. Had a lot of work from Avco, had a lot of work from a DuPont, Ford glass plant out there. We were doing work for them. He had plenty of work. So at that point, I proceeded to tell him that I was not going to work in that environment any longer. And I could come out of there and been big, fat, and lazy with a bit of problem and all kinds of money and benefits. That's an ideal place for a lazy person that don't care what it costs to make something. That's not worried about something. So anyway, I didn't have a whole full year in when I quit. I quit Avco with just under a year in. I just couldn't take it any longer for that. So at that point, I came and went to work for Mr. Ferris down on Webster Street here in Madison. And he only had just a little two-car garage. He had it rented. And he had one lathe, one milling machine, and one grinder. Most of you don't have a clue to what I'm talking about, these machines that we had. But he was very small. It was him. And at that point, his son could do a little bit of stuff, not much, because he was still going to Maplewood High School. But he hired me to come in there, because I had a lot of experience at Bennett Tool Die. I mean, a lot of experience at Bennett Tool Die. I could do about anything they throwed at me. It didn't make any difference what it was, because I learned quick. That's where mechanically inclined I proved how good I was. I am very mechanically inclined. I didn't waste my time not trying to learn. I had to learn, because it was precision. Whatever you sent from here to California, it had to fit whatever you made it for. So it was very important for me to learn it right, because you make one hole. Remember, you drill one hole in the wrong place, it could be easily $500, or it could be $1,000. In that business, it's big bucks when you mess up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave you at the point of where I have gone to work for my father-in-law, Mr. Gerald Ferris, one of the finest men I ever knew. Good man. So I'm going to leave it there, and I'll see you, I'll see you on 14. No, we're on 14, so it'll be 15. And before I leave on this episode, I'd like to tell you about the Friendship Missionary Baptist Church at 101 Flat Ridge Road in Goodlettsville, Tennessee. We'd sure like to see you out there on a Sunday. We're there at 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock every Sunday, and we got a great preacher. He's just been ordained, and we love him to death, and we have a big time, and we'd love to have you. And don't forget, the address is 101 Flat Ridge Road in Goodlettsville, Tennessee, and Friendship Missionary Baptist Church. And we just love it, and we hope to see you there. And I'll see you on episode 15. And I sure appreciate it. Let's sing. Y'all want to?
I'm going to do When the Saints Go Marching In. Everybody can sing with me, too.
When the Saints go marching in. Boy, that's a good one, isn't it? Here we go. go on Circle Bend Road. I was standing by my window a cold and cloudy day. I saw that hearse rolling gonna carry my mother away. That circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by. There's a better home waiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky. Undertaker, he drives slow. Oh, that lady, you're holding, when I take see her go. But that circle, he unbroken, by and by, Lord, by and by. There's a better home waiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky. Back home, I was lonesome, but my mother, she had gone. All my brothers and sisters crying, Lord, I'm home so sad and alone. That circle be unbroken, by and by, Lord, by and by. There's a better home waiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky. Circle be unbroken, by and by, Lord, by and by. There's a better home waiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky, in the sky, Lord, in the sky. And there it is, ladies and gentlemen.
Jesus died on the cross from a dogwood tree. He gave his life and soul just for you and me. The dogwood was never to grow strong and